Hey everyone, I'm Rick and thanks for joining me. Today we'll be looking at the SMSL Raw MDA1 DAC, and I'd like to thank Apos Audio for loaning me a review sample. I'd also like to ask you to please hit the subscribe button to help this channel grow. The SMSL Raw MDA1 is coming in at around $280 currently, so let's take a look to see what you get. The build quality is very solid. You do get a tiny little bit of flex on the top panel, but everything else is very solid, really similar to the SMSL DO100 Pro. Starting from the left, we have our headphone outputs, the first on 6.5mm single-ended, followed by a 4.4mm Pentacon balanced, and next a very nice full color screen that I'll show you once the unit is on. Our encoder over here turns the unit on with a short press, and then you can turn for volume when it's set to variable. It's currently set to fixed output. Let's take a look at the back. Again from the left, we have our analog outputs, one set on XLRs, one set on RCA, and our digital inputs. 2 coaxial digitals and 2 Toslink opticals, followed by a USB-C and our Bluetooth port. Finally, our IEC inlet with power rocker, and again, they do these just right. Very nice power rockers. Let's go back to the front and we'll look at that menu. With a press to the center button of the remote control, we'll go into our menus, and our first option are inputs. Here we can select our inputs, starting from USB-C, Bluetooth, Optical 1, Coaxial 1, Optical 2, and Coaxial 2. Followed by our outputs. Here we can choose all line outs, headphone out, balanced out, or RCA out, which is unbalanced. Next, our PCM filters. And here we have our 7 standard ESS filters. I like filter number 2, but you have 7. Followed by our headphone gain. In this section, we only have low and high, which I don't mind at all. Next, we have sound color. And in here, we have a few options. We have standard, a few rich options, a few tube, followed by a few crystal. I did all my testing with standard. Next we have our preamp mode. We can have this set to fixed or variable. When in variable, you can use that volume knob to bring the volume up and down. When in fixed, it's not going to move. Now this DAC will output more than the standard 2 volts on RCA or 4 volts on XLR. So what you could do is you can go into variable, set the volume to whatever number you like, then you can come back into fixed and lock it there so you don't accidentally move your volume. Next we have our function key setting, and here we can program what the function key on the remote control does. We can switch it from line to headphone, we can switch our outputs, or we can go straight into Bluetooth. Next our DPLL, our digital phase loop lock, and the default is on 5, and I left it on 5. USB mode, and you can select between class 1 or class 2 here. UI style. You can choose 2 different styles. I prefer the universal dimmer. Here when it's on off, the display will always be on, but you can also select anywhere from 5 seconds up to 60 seconds before the screen goes dark. Brightness. Here we have 5 brightness settings. I have it on 4, but we can go 1 higher and a few lower. And finally, a reset. As for specs, the Raw MDA1 uses a pair of ESS ES9039 Q2M DAC chips, and it's capable of decoding PCM up to 32-bit 768 kHz and DSD to DSD 512. It also decodes MQA if that's your thing, and Bluetooth in the form of Bluetooth 5.1, handling aptX HD as well as LDAC. Again, up to 2.5 watts per channel at 16 ohms on the headphone output, and the rear line level outputs are going to be non-standard again at 2.5 volts on the RCAs and 5.2 volts on the XLRs. And how does the MDA1 sound? Well, it sounds great, but more importantly, it's right in line with this price. I had seen another YouTube reviewer state that he thought that this DAC could compete with $500 to $600 DACs. Well, no, it definitely can't do that. The Raw MDA1 is not at the level of the topping D70 Pro Octo or Sabre. If your budget is closer to $500 to $600, I definitely take a look at those. You're going to get a little more on imaging and detail as well. Those are just a step above. But again, for its price, the Raw MDA1 is great. And to my ears, it falls right in line with the topping D50 Mark III and the SMSL DO100 Pro, which is a great place to be. The Raw MDA1 has that classic ESS sound, which is very detailed, crystal clear, and very crisp, with controlled bass and generally energetic presentation. Comparing the Raw MDA1 to the D50 Mark III coming in at $230 and the DO100 Pro coming in at $220, all 3 of those DACs use the same dual ESS 9039 Q2M chips. And while in my system I do hear very slight differences, it's a real chore to pinpoint exactly what those differences are. And in a blind test, I'd probably be better off with a coin toss. And I can tell you that I'd be very happy with any of those 3 DACs in my system. The real differences are going to be in their use cases. All 3 are tailored to a slightly different use scenario. Not to say that you couldn't use them interchangeably, except for the headphone amplifier. The Raw MDA1 is the only one that does have headphone outs. So first, the Raw MDA1. This one seems to be more tailored as a digital front end because of those 2 Toslink and 2 coaxial inputs. On a higher end DAC, you might see 4 or 5 different inputs, but what good is an AES EBU or I2S if you don't have a component that connects to it? So I'm glad that SMSL went this route and doubled up on those more common digital ins. The DO100 Pro, on the other hand, doesn't give you an extra coaxial or Toslink. However, that DAC does have an HDMI ARC input. So that one might be better suited for use with your television if that's your main thing, and it also has a couple other digitals for a few more sources. I use my DO100 Pro in my bedroom hooked up to a projector. As for the D50 Mark III, well, that one's the most compact of the bunch. So it might be better suited for tight spaces or on desktop use, as well as it might be the best one to travel with. And while the D50 Mark III doesn't have a headphone output, if you purchase the A50 Mark III headphone amp, that does get more expensive and it'll bring your total price up to around $430, but then you'll have a headphone setup that far surpasses what you get out of the Raw MDA1. The D50 A50 combination is going to give you a THD plus N at around 144, whereas you're going to get about 122 out of the Raw MDA1. But back to the Raw MDA1. So about at $60 over the price of the DO100 Pro, what you're getting is a much nicer screen with a much nicer user interface as well, and a very nice headphone amplifier. Now if you don't need or want the headphone amplifier or the nicer screen, well then go with the DO100 Pro. But if you have a streamer, a Sony PlayStation, a CD player, and a TV that you might want to hook up to one DAC and make this the control center, the SMSL Raw MDA1 is an easy recommendation because it has so many of those standard inputs. About the only thing I wish this one had was an additional input for analog line in, and that would have been it. It would have been an awesome little centerpiece to be a digital preamp front end, and I think I would have been a touch more excited about this unit. That being said, this one sounds wonderful again, just like the D50 Mark III and the DO100 Pro. It's just a matter of choosing the one that fits your lifestyle the best. But you can't go wrong with these. And that's all I have for this one, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.